President Obama spoke to the nation about the long war in Iraq, and that's where we begin tonight. He said, quote, "We have met our responsibilities. Now it's time to turn the page." The president declared an end to combat operations. He spoke of the sacrifices of U.S. troops and their families, and he looked ahead at home and abroad. He was somber, almost still behind the desk in the Oval Office, where he noted it all began.
From this desk, 7.5 years ago, President Bush announced the beginning of military operations in Iraq.
That night was filled with the shock and awe of American military might. But history has its own deep secrets. And what unfolded was beyond anyone's imagining. And so, all these years later, President Obama declared this historic milestone.
Tonight, I am announcing that the American combat mission in Iraq has ended. Operation Iraqi Freedom is over, and the Iraqi people now have lead responsibility for the security of their country.
He tried to sum up what the war in Iraq has meant, and what has been accomplished by the more than 1.5 million Americans who have served there.
They defeated a regime that had terrorized its people. Together with Iraqis and coalition partners who made huge sacrifices of their own, our troops fought block by block to help Iraq seize the chance for a better future.
But Iraq is a long way from that future, and in the screams of sirens after bombings, the poverty and dysfunction, the political bickering, it remains doubtful, a reality the president acknowledged.
Of course, violence will not end with our combat mission. Extremists will continue to set off bombs, attack Iraqi civilians, and try to spark sectarian strife. But ultimately, these terrorists will fail to achieve their goals.
There are scars at home, too. The Iraq War divided the country, and those divisions were deep and bitter.
I'm mindful that the Iraq War has been a contentious issue at home. Here, too, it's time to turn the page.
In the Battle of Iraq, the United States and our allies have prevailed.
President Obama's predecessor, who launched the war and rejoiced so theatrically in the success of its early stages, saw his presidency ultimately crippled by it. Here, too, though, President Obama sought to make a gesture of reconciliation.
This afternoon, I spoke to former President George W. Bush. It's well known that he and I disagreed about the war from its outset. Yet no one can doubt President Bush's support for our troops or his love of country and commitment to our security. The greatness of our democracy is grounded in our ability to move beyond our differences and to learn from our experience as we confront the many challenges ahead.
But for most, this moment is one for reflection. Defense Secretary Robert Gates was overcome with emotion at the thought of what has been given and lost in this war.
The courage of these men and women, their determination, their sacrifice, and the sacrifice of their families, along with the service and sacrifice of so many others in uniform, have made this day, this transition, possible, and we must never forget.
There's another war, of course, even older than Iraq, and President Obama sought to reinvigorate a war-weary nation for the challenges ahead in Afghanistan.
We will disrupt, dismantle, and defeat al-Qaeda while preventing Afghanistan from again serving as a base for terrorists. And because of our drawdown in Iraq, we are now able to apply the resources necessary to go on offense.
And with Americans still suffering and anxious in an economy that barely shows a pulse, the president pivoted to the nation's most pressing concern today.
Our most urgent task is to restore our economy and put the millions of Americans who've lost their jobs back to work. This will be difficult, but in the days to come, it must be our central mission as a people and my central responsibility as president.
50,000 U.S. troops remain in Iraq, and as so many others come home and their mission changes, President Obama tried to draw inspiration from what they did, serve with honor.
Our troops are the steel in our ship of state. And though our nation may be traveling through rough waters, they give us confidence that our course is true, and that beyond the pre-dawn darkness, better days lie ahead.